Hello friends! Today I'm super excited about the little knit I'm going to make because I've been wanting to do this project for a while, but I don't know why I keep putting it off, but I do. I just keep putting it off. So I've always wanted to knit something vintage, something old, right? So I went digging around on the internet and I found this pattern here from the American National Red Cross, and it's a watch cap for the US Navy. So it appears what would happen is that the chapters of the American National Red Cross would send out this pattern and some yarn and have people knit these caps and then send them back to that chapter. And then they would disperse them out through the United States Navy, which I think is pretty cool. And there's no picture here, so it's kind of like a mystery knit along. But it looks fairly simple. It looks just like a ribbed beanie. So I'm going to follow this pattern specifically to the instructions. I'm not going to try to improvise. I'm not going to try to fit it to circular needles or anything like that. I'm going to follow it exactly as it states. So I have some lovely yarn here. This is a wool polyamide viscose blend that was gifted to me. A friend actually was at a thrift store and saw it, and it's part of a larger haul that they grabbed for me at the thrift store. So this is a DK weight, and we're going to go through the instructions and kind of give you the idea of what you need here. So it says the equipment needed is yarn, 4 ounces of 4/8 sweater yarn. So I looked this up, and this is around a DK weight yarn. So grab this one, we're good there. Needles, we're going to need 4 needles to fit the Red Cross needle gauge for socks, babies' knitted wear, etc. And it says gauges available from area offices. I looked that up, and it looked like the needle gauge for this was around 3.5 to 3.75. So I'm going to use 3.5. So it says you need 4 needles. And in the instructions here for making, it says to cast on 140 stitches and proceed as follows. So it looks like on this cast on and the preceding rows, we're going to be knitting flat. So what I'm going to do is, because I don't want to try to scooch 140 stitches on these needles, or this one needle, I'm going to use some straight points. And I've got some 3.5. Funny enough, these are vintage as well. These were found in a thrift store. So we're just all vintaged out today. So I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to move these to the side and move this to the side. And let's go ahead and take a look at our instructions. So it says to cast on 140 stitches. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So this is going to get a little wonky because there's not enough space between the camera and the table. So I'm probably going to knock things around for a second. But I will not cast on all 140 stitches while you're sitting here watching me. I'll just do a few. So I'm going to pull out a generous amount of yarn, enough to give me 140 cast-ons, and there is no scientific way to do this. Just do it until you can eyeball it and say, okay, that would be enough. You'll get better at it as you go on, but just you always want to err on the side of more instead of less, because it's awful to get to 110 stitches and then you need to add more yarn. There's ways to do it, but I don't particularly like those ways, so I just like to give myself generous amounts over here. So I'm gonna set up to do my cast on. I'm gonna get started. So on this, you want to do a stretchy cast on. So I'm going to do the German twisted or the old Norwegian cast on, which is a very lovely stretchy cast on. And there's videos on my channel. I'll link to one of them in the card above, or the little thing above up here, so you can kind of get a tutorial on how to do that if you haven't done it, but I'm going to assume that you have before. So I've got 5 stitches here. I'm going to go ahead and get 140 stitches on my needle, and then I will meet you back here when I'm done with that. All right, so I've got all my stitches here. I've gone ahead and trimmed my end, but I've left a little bit of a long end because I'm assuming since this edge is knit flat, that there's going to be some seaming. So let's see. Yes, sew together strip at border. So I'm assuming this strip that we're doing right now is going to be sewn together. So I left a longer than normal tail here so I could use that for sewing. All right, so turn my needle here. So my stitches are on the left. Now our first row is going to be a knit one, purl one. So let's go ahead and get set up to do that. So I'm going to make sure I'm not knitting with the tail end of the yarn here. So the first row is always the toughest because it's just the cast on edge. So it's a little bit tight to get your needle in, especially if you're a tight cast on type of person like I am. I always tend to do it a little bit too tight, even though I attempt not to. So all right, so knit one, purl one, and we're going to do that for all 140 stitches. And once you get done with that, I'll meet you back here. All right, so I've done the first row of knit one, purl one. Now it says the second row we're going to purl one, knit one. So this looks like it's going to be a seed stitch border. So let's go ahead and get set up to do that. So purl one, and then, oh my goodness. Fighting these needles against this table. Purl one, knit one, and then purl one, knit one all the way down. That's strange. Seed stitch border. Okay then. I wouldn't think that the US Navy would allow such decorative stuff, but who knows? All right, so I'm going to continue working the purl one, knit one all the way to the end, and let's see what we have to do after that. So let's pause here for a second. So we're going to repeat these 2 rows twice, making a total of 6 rows. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to put a little needle here so I can see where I'm at. So I'm going to work these rows until I get 6 rows, and then I'll meet you back there. All right, so I've got the seed stitch border done here, and this is what it looks like. You should have something very similar if you're following along with me. Got little nubs. I love it so much. All right, let's read our next instructions. So now it says put stitches on 3 needles, 46 stitches on the first 2 and 48 stitches on the third. And then we're going to knit 1, purl 1 in rounds for 12 inches. So let's grab our double pointed needles. So I've got 1 here, so we need 46 stitches on the first 2. So let's go ahead and move those over. 1, 2, 3, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Ooh, I was hoping, let's see. Okay, so that's 46, and that's getting a little tight for me, a little too crowded for my comfort, but we're just gonna roll with it. Really hope this doesn't fall off the end. Okay. Oh, I'm so nervous to let this go, because this looks like it's gonna fall off. Like these are gonna scooch right off the end of this. Okay, so if we're doing it in rounds now, then I could essentially use a circular needle, because these stitches are very crowded on this needle, and I just feel like they're just going to launch right off. But this is only going to be for, well, no, not really, because if I get to going in the round and it's this crowded already, we're going to run into issues. So let me adjust here. I'm going to go get my circular needles because I do not want to drop any stitches off the end of these needles, and this is way too crowded for my taste. I just kind of feel like once I get going in the round, I'm going to end up with stitches just shooting off the ends of these things because of how crowded it is. Let me go grab that. Okay, so I've got my circulars here. I feel much more comfortable doing it this way because I don't want to lose any stitches. So I'm going to scoot these down as far as I possibly can. I'm going to move this up and I'm going to hold it so those stitches don't fall off the end, and I'm going to transfer these over to the circular. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of the stitches onto the circular, and then we'll meet up in a second. If you're following along and, you know, you're like, man, my DPNs are crowded too, I don't feel comfortable, switch to a circular. We're knitting in the round at this point, so the tools we use are, like, I wanted to stay historically accurate to this, but I also don't want to make this something where I'm just stressed the whole time I'm working on it. So we'll make one adjustment so far, just in the tools we're using, and you're more than welcome to do that, or you're welcome to use DPNs if you're comfortable with that as well. All right, I'll meet you back here when I'm done getting these stitches on this circular. All right, I have all my stitches transferred over to the circular. We should have something that looks like this. So I'm not going to try to force that on the inside. So now we're going to start working in rows. We're going to knit one, purl one in rows, or in rounds, I'm sorry. So we're just going to continue working all the way around regardless. I'm not going to work flat anymore. So let's see, knit one, purl one in rounds for 12 inches. So this is going to be a knit one, purl one ribbing. And I know that knit one, purl ones, when I do them, they look weird. They just look weird. And there's like, I don't know how to explain it. It just doesn't look neat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a twisted rib where I knit one through the back loop. So I'm going to knit through the back loop. If I can get my damn needle in there. All right, there we go. Knit one through the back loop and then purl. And knit one through the back loop. Ooh, hold on a second. Hold on. Something's weird. So I was about to mess up here. So for knitting in the round, then I actually need to turn this to where the yarn's coming from the right, because we want to connect those two pieces, right? Let me make sure I'm not twisted up here. Yes, all my seed stitch is, my border's pointing downwards. So now I'm going to start doing that. Oh my Jesus, I almost messed that up. Okay, and I'm also going to place a stitch marker to mark the beginning of the round. So knit one through the back loop and purl, and I'm going to tug a little bit tight on this first little connector here so there's not like a gap. And I'm knitting through the back loop. It's just going to make that ribbing look a lot more clean and tidy and pretty, instead of like all gappy looking like it does when I do it. Now, if you knit one, purl one ribbing, like if you can do that without it looking gappy, then go ahead and, you know, do your thing. But I'm just going to do my twisted ribbing. All right, so we got to do this for 12 inches, so that's going to be a little time consuming, but I think the monotony of it will make it easy. It's just something I can just put Netflix on and just go at. So I will meet you back when I have 12 inches of this done. Okay, after what seemed like forever, but really wasn't that long, I have got 12 inches. So this is 12 inches in the knit one, purl one rib, and you can see, let me show you the twisted rib, I think that's what it's called. Doesn't it produce a much neater looking rib? I usually get very elongated or weird looking knits that have like gaps in the middle of them, but when I do it this way, it just looks so much cleaner, and I prefer it. So I've got my point protectors here. If you like these, I do sell these in my shop. They're very cheap. I can't remember the price right offhand because I stocked them a while ago, but they're very cheap, and they come with a bunch of them. Let's see, I have them right here. So they come with a bunch of them. There's one missing, but they come with, there's one missing because obviously I've got one here, and then I've got one somewhere else as well. So Twice Sheared Sheep make these, and they're called tip tie point protectors. And I like these a lot because not only can you do, like, not only does it hold your needles in place, but they also, you can use them to move stitches off needles, and it's really easy. But they come with different sizes, so you have the really small ones, these are a little bit bigger, and then you have the really big ones. So they come with all these different sizes in the pack. So you can get those in my shop if you're interested in supporting me and you want to buy some really cool little knitting gadgets. One note I will make on these, don't cram them on really hard, because they're like, you remember those Chinese finger puzzles that you would stick your fingers in from both ends and then you would try to pull and you could never get your finger out? That's kind of how these are. So whenever you stick these in here, it creates kind of like a little compression of the air in there. And if you jam them really, really hard on there, it's going to be really difficult to get them off. So I just very lightly place them on there. And then when I'm ready to take them off, I just pop them. And they make this amazing little crunchy sound when you pull them off. And it's like, oh, it just gives me brain tingles. All right, enough of that. So I'm going to take my point protectors off. I'm going to move this over. Now let's see what it's going to have us do next. So we have the knit one, purl one in rounds for 12 inches. Now we're going to knit plain without ribbing for 1 inch. So knitting plain in olden terms was just knit the whole round around. So I'm going to go ahead and knit plain without ribbing for 1 inch. I've got my work set up here. Let me move this so it's not flopping all around. So I'm going to get started just to kind of show you. Now I'm not going to keep doing the twisted because there's no reason. When you're knitting plain like this, there's no reason to knit twisted. So I'm just going to continue on doing, this is squirrely. Why is this, maybe it's because my needles, I've got the tips like so, there we go. I have the yarn too far apart. So I'm going to keep knitting for 1 inch and then I will meet you back. All right, so I've knit plain for 1 entire inch here. So that's what it should look like. You should have some nice knit plain here at the top. Let's see what it says now to do. So it says break thread leaving about 12 inches and draw thread through all stitches. All right, that's easy enough. So let's pull out a length of yarn here. So we're going to pull out a generous amount. And then we're just going to go ahead and snip. All right, so let's go ahead and thread our needle. All right, sorry, I had a call come through. All right, so the needle is threaded. So I'm going to turn my work around here. I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to start going in. So let's pull this out a little bit so that the stitches don't fall off. So I'm going to pull this needle up a little And then I'm going to take my yarn, get it into a good position, and just start popping these bad boys off. So I'm just going in like I'm purling and then just pulling it. Once I get a certain number on there, like, you know, nothing mathematical, I'm just going to pull it through. All right, so then you just keep moving those needles or the stitches up the needle, and then just keep putting that thread through those stitches. And I will meet you back once I get all of these stitches threaded. All right. Okay, all of my stitches are now threaded through here. So I'm going to remove my needle, move these things. Let's put things away so it's nice and tidy. I don't like being cluttered in my work area. So we don't need this anymore. Perfect. You know what? I actually still think I need the needle, so let's leave that there. Okay. So now it says, gather as tightly as possible, then sew firmly together to entirely close opening and make a pleated effect. First sewing together in one direction and then in the opposite direction, etc. So let's go ahead and let's gather this up. So this is nerve-wracking. So we're gonna gather it up as tightly as possible. So we're just gonna pull on that string. Being careful if you're using wool, be careful not to pull too hard because you'll break your yarn. So I'm trying to be mindful of that here. So it doesn't look like we're gonna get a complete close because there was no decreasing done. So there's gonna be a little hole there. So I'm assuming that's what we're gonna end up sewing tightly together. All right, so I'm gonna thread my needle again with the yarn that I just used to tighten that up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it right through that hole and grab it. So I have my hand inside and I'm gonna grab that needle. I'm gonna pull it all the way through. And then I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna turn it inside out because I wanna sew this tightly together. And this is gonna give me the perfect place to do that. So I'm going to pinch that little opening together. So we've got a little opening here. I'm gonna pinch it together and then I'm gonna start taking my needle and pulling it as if I'm sewing together. So I'm going to do just standard back and forth sewing. This is going to be very pleated at the top, so we don't need to worry too much about making it look super fancy because it's going to get lost in all of those pleats. But you don't want to be too sloppy. Just make sure when you're sewing, you're not going all the way down here, right? You want to stay as close to the top as possible. And you can see when you're getting the stitches together, like each side. So I'm going to keep sewing, and I'm going to stop and then open it up and see where I've still got a hole. So I've still got a hole like right here. So I'm going to scoot down a little bit, press that open, and then I'm going to make sure I don't go down too far, just grabbing the top stitches, and then pinch that closed, and then go over it a couple more times, staying close to the top. These look like little butt cheeks getting in the way. So let's fuss it up a little bit here and see, do we have any more holes? So there's a very small little hole right here. So let me navigate back towards, I'm going to take the yarn because it's clear on the other side over here. And I'm just going to mosey it on down. So I'm going to insert it here, insert it here. Like, you can't go overboard when you're sewing it together like this. It's just going to make it more sturdy. So now I'm going to address that little tiny hole we've got on that side. And then I'm going to do one more here. So I'm going to, before I pull it all the way through, I'm going to leave a little loop. And I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to feed it through that loop. And then I'm going to pull it tight. I'm going to do that a couple more times. So I'm just going to pick some arbitrary spot here, close to the top. Might be getting a little tough to get your needle through there because you've been doing so many stitches. I'm going to do that maneuver one more time. So just loop it through. So I'm creating a little knot there and then pull it taut. And then I'm going to leave a little bit of an end here because it's on the inside and it's going to get lost and frazzled at some point. Trim the yarn, throw it away where your dog can't get it and eat it. And let's turn the hat back inside, or right side out. And look at there, look at that. We got a nice little pleat. Perfect. All right, our hat is very close to being finished. Our cap, I should say, our watch cap. Our watch cap is very close to being finished with our little puckered top here. It's so cute. All right. Now it says, press with a damp cloth and warm iron. Sew together strip at border. So I'm not going to press it. I'm basically asking to wet block it. I don't really think I need to wet block it because it's pretty nice as is. So now it's asking us to close up this little bit here that we started with on the DPNs. Or the circulars, I guess, whatever, where we were knitting flat. So I'm going to grab this yarn. Now, if you're not worried about historical accuracy, and you're like, I just want to do this the easiest way possible, then by all means, just work this ribbing or the border edge in circulars. Like, there's no need to work it flat, as far as I'm concerned, if you have access to circular needles, or even if you have DPNs and you're using DPNs, just work in circular. I don't understand why this was done the way it's done. So I want to join this together. So I'm going to pinch it right here. And my yarn's coming from the top, so I'm going to pinch it together as evenly as I possibly can. And then I'm just going to mattress stitch it together. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing I did earlier. I'm just going in one side only and just letting the yarn kind of overlap the seam. And then just working all the way down. Oh my gosh, I just unthreaded my needle. Goodness gracious. Okay, we're back in business. Keep going till you get down here to the bottom. I'm going to go a little bit more at the bottom just to make sure it's taut. Let's go back and check it. That looks good. Do we have any gaps or holes? No, we're good to go. All right, now if you wanted to be extra super cautious, then you can go back down the way you came, doing the same kind of motions, reinforcing that seam. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. I'm just going to go back because I missed this little top bit here. I want to make sure it's nice and even when it's put on. Okay, so now we're going to finish it off. I'm going to go down just a little bit more here. I'm going to do my little trick again where I feed the needle through the open loop, pull tight. I'm going to do that one more time, just grabbing some random point along the seam. It's going to be really difficult because you've got like so much yarn there that's folded over each other, but just get it in there anywhere you can. The point is to seam it off now, or close it off, not to worry about seaming it anymore. And then pull it tight. Now I'm going to give it a little snippy snip. Throw the yarn away. There we go. So now our seam is done on the edge. So now we can flip it over Now we have a little beanie. You know, looking back, I should have done it on the inside. I should have done the seam on the inside. But after some wear, it's gonna kind of felt a little bit, and maybe it won't be so noticeable. We can always turn it around to the back as well. So if you're following along and you haven't yet done it, just do it on the inside if you don't like the seam showing. I don't particularly mind it. But look at there. That's our beanie. Now you could block it to kind of get rid of some of that little squiggly that happens from the border meeting the ribbing, but it's not necessary. I would like to see what this looks like on the mannequin though, so let me do that real quick.